Hi, everybody. My name is Jacqueline Ryan, and I am part of Wedding Planning Simplified. I am also a wedding planner with Unmistakably You in London, Ontario. I am also arguably not the most tech savvy, apparently, as I have just been spewing knowledge at you. And Amy sent me a quick text saying, "Is the live not working?" Because I forgot to add myself into the broadcast. But now that I am here, I am so excited to finally get to chat with you about what we are seeing most commonly happen while you're planning your wedding in 2022. Now, again, I'm not here to spew and say that I know the all in and outs of what wedding planning looked like generations before. But as Amy would say, us snowflakes, us Gen Z or millennials, or if you're a 90s baby like me, we're awkwardly on the cusp. We like to think that we are going through things a little bit more difficult than other couples have been in the past. So what I'd like to talk about today is some new concerns that we're seeing some couples have, or if they're not new concerns, they've just become more commonly discussed, which again, I'm all for transparency. I love being more open and discussing what's really stressing couples out. We do this every single Sunday, Amy and I, whether we decide to go together one-on-one, or if we decide to bring in some guest speakers, we like to kind of bring the curtain down, cut the facade, and get real with you guys as to what wedding planning really entails. And we cover different topics week to week. So again, this week I'm covering what wedding planning looks like in 2022 compared to years previous. Now, this will have a little bit of insights in terms of what I'm noticing as I slowly start entering the phases of planning my own wedding, as well as what I've noticed our couples have balanced with, whether it was, before COVID-19 or as we're still navigating wedding plans in COVID-19. So you may find some of these topics may be really relevant for you. You may find some topics that aren't relevant for you at all. So as I always say, take what you need, leave some love if you don't need it at all. And as always, you can always find a little bit more detail about all of these topics on the Unmistakably You website in our blog section. So the first topic that I'd like to cover that definitely is not a new concern per se, but definitely is more openly talked about is the idea of family dynamics within your wedding planning. Now, again, this is going to seem bizarre. We've often been called out for saying, don't plan your wedding, plan your marriage, because again, what wedding planner in their right mind is telling you not to plan your wedding? But I'm also going to talk about a not so fun topic, which is divorce. Chances are, as you are navigating your wedding plans, you are likely coming into not discussions about divorce by any means, but chances are there's somewhere in your guest list or in your family where divorce lies. And that can often cause a shift in family dynamics. I know for my family, I love the amount of bonus siblings that I have and the amount of bonus parents I have, but that came really later in my life. So when I reflect back navigating my own wedding plans now, I've never pictured having a step family or step siblings in my wedding plans because, it just wasn't the way when I was dreaming up my wedding in grade 8. But now that it is, I get to now navigate these waters that a lot of our couples are. So with divorce, there can be a lot of different things that come into your wedding plans, whether that's having to navigate a lot of different emotions. Maybe you find yourself in a mediator role where you're constantly just trying to keep everybody level, which can bring a lot of additional stress to you. Or maybe it's just the honest fact that with more people comes more expenses. So you now have to accommodate for a higher guest count because you have additional people that you love, that you care about, that you want to celebrate with. But that can also be an additional stressor. Now, Amy and I often talk about that anybody that gives their physical 2 cents into their wedding, meaning that they are helping you financially contribute to their wedding or to your wedding story, that they are technically able to give their mental 2 cents as to what they like to see at your wedding, to what they prefer to see at your wedding, to how they did it at their wedding. It can become increasingly difficult if you've got a big handful of bonus parents contributing financially, but also contributing with some ideas and perspectives. Again, coming out of what was a very quiet and isolating 3 years, getting any kind of feedback or advice can be difficult. But let's be honest, getting any type of feedback or advice for our generation is increasingly difficult. We don't often receive it well. So a big common theme that you're going to see me talk about today is knowing not to bite the hand that feeds you and understand that everybody that does want to contribute to your wedding is coming in a sense with love and light. With that in mind, they will also try to contribute some physical objects. So again, depending on where your lineage lies, as far as when your bonus family or your step family came along, you could have a really close relationship with, let's say, your stepmother. And when it comes time to choosing some wedding accessories, your mom would love it if you would wear her veil, but your stepmother would also love it if you would wear her hairpiece. It can become increasingly difficult to balance that pressure of what's decided. So again, we cover this a lot in our family dynamic blog, but setting those expectations early, deciding what's ultimately going to serve you and your partner best, and sticking to your guns is a really, really key component of navigating difficult family dynamics. And again, this beautiful world of being more transparent with one another and being honest, being able to openly discuss your concerns about this. You know, you are grown up enough to get married. You are grown up enough to have these difficult conversations, or not even difficult conversations, just uncomfy. You know, there's a lot more difficult conversations coming down the line for you. I hate to warn you. So this is just an uncomfy bump in the road that ultimately, the sooner you handle, the sooner it is handled, and you can move on and focus on the fun stuff. Now, in addition to that family dynamic, a lot of our couples are now incorporating their own children in their wedding plans. And again, this is super common in a post, or I shouldn't say a post-pandemic world, but definitely after taking a little bit of a break in 2020 from the real world and having people decide that, you know, I'm not putting my life on hold forever. I'm still going to be getting married regardless, or maybe they decide to do a micro ceremony and now they're finally able to host their big reception with their families. Whatever it might look like, a lot of couples are incorporating their own children into their plans, or they're having to adjust their wedding plans because they're either planning for a pregnancy or have become pregnant in this transitional period. So with that in mind, you may have a higher increase on, you know, a focus on all age entertainment. Your main focus might not be the open bar at 9 o'clock now. You might consider getting a magician, a caricature artist. You might love the idea of a band because you know that your little one loves to do a great air guitar solo and you know it's going to get the dance floor going. You might change your priorities now that you have a family. You know, when you started your wedding plans in 2019, your focus may have been on your florals, but now that you've developed your priorities as a family, as a couple, they may have altered, and that's okay. As long as you're being very clear and being honest with what you are doing with your vendors and with your family, there's no wedding police. In addition to incorporating children at your wedding, you always want to make sure, and again, risk analysis brain up the wazoo over here, but you need to be aware of your menu requirements as well as insurance requirements if you are incorporating children in your wedding. Some insurance policies actually only cover adults. And because of that, some venues actually won't allow children on the premise because they're not covered. It's not to say that we plan on, you know, Junior Tucker chugging a bottle of Fireball, so that's why they don't want to cover him. That's not it at all. It's just that Junior Tucker might climb up the ladder and slip, and they just don't have that kind of liability insurance. So they want to make sure that your little ones are covered. So being transparent and honest, like, hey, we're going to have 4 to 5 toddlers. What insurance policies do you need from us to keep them covered? Or is that allowed? And as long as you're asking those questions up front, you won't find yourself in a sticky, stressful situation having to navigate those waters 3 to 2 weeks to potentially on the day of your wedding. In addition, like I had mentioned, you may not have a huge focus on your bar, especially if you are, you know, planning for pregnancy or if you are currently pregnant. You might love the idea of having a lemonade stand or loving the idea of doing a mocktail stand. And personally, again, just an idea from a friendly neighborhood wedding planner, do a lemonade stand. And it's $2 for a lemonade, but that $2 specifically is going to the baby fund. It's completely separate from your guest book, completely separate from your honeymoon fund. It's a great way to also, if you haven't had the opportunity to tell your family, you're gathered all together anyways. Find a way to incorporate your family or incorporate your family announcements on your wedding day, because ultimately your wedding is just creating your little family in itself. So find a way to celebrate it, and however you'd like to incorporate your littles, just always keep them top of mind. I've been really fortunate, and I know Amy, Jen, Cass, Chrissy, Naura, Emma, everybody on the UI team has been incredibly fortunate to watch some incredible couples get unified, get married, and celebrate with their littles, because they also planned ahead. A lot of our couples are incredible at being aware of what parental concerns and parental roles that they will have to accommodate for. So for instance, if you do have a really young little one and you have to accommodate a feeding schedule, this is something that you'll want to talk to your photographer, your coordinator, and your caterer about, because you'll want to make sure that you're able to take care of your little's feeding schedule when you're not in the middle of having to eat your own dinner. You'll also want to make sure that that little has time to, have a nap. Maybe they're going to want to have some time to run around and get rid of all of that excitement and that energy. But there also may be, and we talked about this when you're trying to incorporate a pet at your wedding, you also may have to look inward and really think, what's going to serve my child best? And again, you know your child better than anyone. That is not on anybody else to decide. But if you know you've got a little one that really acts shy as soon as they're around other people, and that their safety zone is you have to recognize that you can't be there the whole day with your little one as much as you want to. And you have to know that you have that support, that you have an understanding of who could take over if there were ever to be a situation where the little really just wants to be with you and can't be. You may also find yourself in the difficult decision of realizing, hey, that's a really big day. That is 16 hours of my little one getting dressed up around people, surrounded by heat, sun, whatever else it might be. And it might be a little too overstimulating. So whatever it is, these are just things that we now have to consider that other generations may not have, because again, we weren't openly discussing pregnancy and having children on our wedding days back in the 50s. So these are some things that when we lean into our families and ask for advice, they just might not know. And that's okay. Amy and I are huge again for saying there's no wedding police, but there's also there are parental police, but there's no parental police at your wedding. So if it works out better for you to hire your babysitter to come in for the entire wedding day and do a little bit of childcare, so then that way you know that your little is covered, is entertained, is safe, is being fed, is being, taken care of the way that you're being taken care of by your coordinator, by your photographer, and by your venue coordinator, then you have that additional breathing moment of, this is 100% for me. And again, I'm not a parent, but watching all of my friends and my family parent, I think honestly, you deserve that. You deserve a day where you don't have to worry about that. Now, another concern that is fairly common for couples, and I know it's a big concern for myself, and Netflix honestly coined a great saying, but it's that idea of planning for your mortgage over your marriage. Or typically what we find is a lot of our couples, because you get engaged, you keep growing, you keep transitioning, and then you want to buy a house, but that's in between your wedding. So not only is it a lot of emotional stress, it's a lot of financial stress as well. We're going to touch a little bit more on the financial stresses way later on. We don't need to do that. We've talked enough about budgeting this month. I'm going to give you a little bit of a breather. Talking more in terms of what it looks like in the modern day age, where now we're not doing this lineage growth of living at home, getting married, then buying a house together. Very commonly, we're now living with our partners and then we're getting married, because we now know all of their nasty little dirty habits of, they drop their toothbrush beside the toilet and they don't think that they need to throw it out. They just put it back in their mouth. Whatever the gross habit is, you've already learned to love it. But in addition to already learning to love their behavior, you've also likely learned and begun to love your own home decor, your own style. Chances are you already have a KitchenAid mixer. So when you finally sit down to create your wedding registry, a lot of times Amy and I get emails going, we have no idea what to put on our registry. We already live together. It feels kind of weird to just ask for money, but how do we just ask everybody for money? The point is, there's never going to be an easy way to talk to your family about how you just like to get money after your wedding. We can send you a bunch of cutesy little words on how you can phrase it on your invitations, but ultimately it's always going to feel a little yucky asking for money. Again, resort back to a few minutes ago where I talked about that pride thing, how we don't always love handouts. This is a big one. Although we want money and we ultimately need the money after a wedding expense, it's really hard to discuss that. So doing yourself the service of not finding yourself to be in a position to need that money after your wedding is going to save you. And again, that's a lot of words for me saying be budget savvy the second it starts, the second your wedding planning starts. Now, how many of you, and you don't need to feel personally attacked, if you quickly exit out of the video, I understand. But how many of you, the second you got engaged, signed up for the subscription boxes like the Miss to Misses or the Mr. to Misters or any How many of you bought the coffee mug that says, "Does this ring make me look engaged?" You need to add that $19 mug to your wedding budget because that was a wedding expense. It is crazy. It is a beautiful, crazy wedding market out there, but we have really found a way to celebrate all the tiny milestones of your wedding. I am currently staring at a piggy bank that says wedding fund. I didn't buy it, but all of these little purchases really add up. And oftentimes when you're saving for a mortgage, it's easy for you to cut out those little expenses. When you're saving for your wedding, it's really easy for you to justify all of these little details, all of these little expenses. Amy asked this week, what's one thing that you've incorporated in your wedding that your guests really won't care or notice? And a lot of us said decor. So being budget savvy isn't just advised, it is 100% needed in this day and age. The cost of everything is incomparable to when other generations got married. And it's not to say that they didn't have their own budget struggles, but it's completely different. I know that sounds like a complete oxymoron. It's completely the same, but it's also completely different. But it feels a little bit more pressure for us. Again, commonly, you would use your wedding money to buy your house, but right now you may already be in that hole of buying your house. So you really have to plan ahead financially and know that planning your marriage is way more integral than planning all of the little details. Now, this is a lot easier said than done when you are finding your wedding vendors in the 2022 year. Now, chances are, if you have not been living under a rock, you know the term wedding boom. Now, wedding boom is similar to the baby boomers, where it's just an influx of weddings happening in a limited amount of time. So it's increased the demand of wedding vendors, which has ultimately increased the productivity of wedding vendors, which has either increased the size of their overhead stock, increase their amount of inventory, or increase their team, which ultimately leads to an increase of expenses, which unfortunately means a little bit of increase in pricing for you. So back in the day, it may have been common for you to use that florist on the corner of Elm Street because, you know, they did grandma's wedding, they did my wedding, they did Uncle Paul's funeral, they do everybody's wedding. But in the beautiful world of social media, we know a lot more florists than that guy on the corner of Elm Street. We now have access to however many florists we really want to navigate through. And again, not to quote Spider-Man as often as I am, but with more choices comes more spending. More spending. The bigger the market, the bigger the chance of you going over budget. So understand that the more vendor shopping you do, or the more vendor window hunting you do, the more you may actually be hindering how much wedding planning you're doing. So yes, we are a very technological savvy generation, but we also over research things. So once you find a vendor that you really jive with, you like their style, instantly send them an inquiry because their chances are there's 7 other people doing the same thing behind you. Because not only is there an increase in the amazing market of vendors, there is a massive increase in couples also competing for similar dates, similar styles, and similar, well, everything. And unfortunately in Ontario, we only have a short month stint, or not a full month stint, story, but about from May until October is typically peak season. So oftentimes we have an influx of couples requiring those days for bookings, and we only have X amount of dates available. We've had to turn around countless couples. And I'm sure if you're listening to this video, you've experienced the frustration of being turned down by a vendor that you really wanted just because they're not available. So make sure that you are reaching out to vendors way earlier, but also prioritize your vendors. Understand what vendors are 100% necessary. I know from experience, typically down the line when I'm advising couples for planning their vendor hunts, I usually add officiants to the top of the list now. And it's not to say that they were ever at the bottom of my list, but legally, you need an officiant there to get married. So that should be concrete, lined up, no ifs, ands, or buts, in my opinion. The next Amy will talk about goes completely into whatever your priorities are, whether it's food, photography, florals, decor, but you just need to understand that the higher your expectations are and the higher the inspiration photos you send, likely the higher that price point is going to be. And it's unfortunately not because us nasty wedding vendors want to pocket gouge you. It's because we just have such a mass amount of clients already in our books that we want to make sure that we're able to reach your expectations and give you the quality we need. But in all honesty, we're not 100% sure what's going to be available in inventory or what's going to be available in terms of weather and dates. So we just want to make sure that we have you covered as well. So understanding that there is a little bit more difficulty in hunting for the vendors than there may have been, there's likely going to be a little bit more back and forth prior to booking with your vendors. Especially coming out of COVID, you want to make sure that you're comfortable with these people, that you really jive with them, especially if it's somebody that you're spending most of your wedding day with. You want to make sure that you don't have any awkward lulls in conversation because it will show. So with that in mind, you want to make sure that you're choosing reliable and trustworthy vendors. And this can be done by going off of Google reviews, but also going off of word of mouth. So choosing some Google reviews and maybe reaching out to who's posted them to say, hey, I'd love to hear more about your day. If you see a less than favorable Google review, you can also ask that vendor, hey, I did see that you had a kind of crummy 2-star. Do you want to give me your perspective? The more open and communicative you are to your vendors, again, I'm not saying that every single vendor is going to respond back to every email that you send and get and bare their soul and get to know you on that personal level. But the more that you try to get to know your vendors on a personal level, the more we're going to know how to serve you best. And that is definitely a new trend that I've seen in this year of wedding planning that I hadn't seen in years prior. In addition to that, because you are likely reaching out to a lot more vendors than couples had to previously, you're going to want to make sure that you're staying organized. You're going to want to make sure that you're staying on track of all of your emails and you're going to really want to make sure that you are keeping on track and organized your final bill payments, as well as if you are in those early stages of just getting packages sent back, you want to make sure that you know which package is for which vendor. Because the second you get those wires mismatched and crossed, it's the second that those expectations start to get a little bit fuzzy, and typically where you can add that additional stress of, oh gosh, I really thought that I booked the right vendor, but maybe I didn't because I thought that this guy's website was this color, but now it's this. Website colors aren't enough to keep you organized. Get a Google spreadsheet, go back to basics of pen, paper, and binder, and always, always, always back it up to a cloud or to an external drive. This is a really important day, so be organized about it. Again, organized can become more difficult the more people get involved. So it's really difficult not to go back to those good old romantic comedies that we were raised on of keeping the entourage and having all of your friends shared on your Pinterest boards, your Google Excel sheets, all of the things. But I personally believe that everything to do with your wedding, you want to travel light, you want to pack some water, you want to have some snacks, and you just want to be ready to chat. And that is especially prevalent in wedding shows these days. Now, if you are lucky enough to tune in to our Facebook Lives this month, we were chatting all about the Wedding Ring show next week that we are attending on Sunday, February 27th. I'm going to make sure that I link the registration link in the video. So that way, if you haven't registered, you can register for free, pop in, visit Amy and I in person. But enough of that. What I really want to talk about is that wedding shows used to be having a huge entourage and making it a big day and a big event. And it's going to be so exciting. And we're going to pick all of our vendors and we're going to get all of this work done. And then you get in the car when you finish the day and you are exhausted. You've probably had at least 1 to 2 fights with your wedding party. You haven't eaten. All you've had is a couple tasters of wine and you can't even remember who you talked to. So what I mean by traveling light, travel with fewer people. Travel with the people that have either planned their wedding before and know exactly where to go for the wedding shows to show you exactly where you need to be, or travel with friends that are super organized if you're not organized. You know, Amy and I joke all the time when we are helping young wedding planners with knowing what to outsource, but the same goes for our couples. If you know that you are not great at administration, you are horrible with names and faces, then bring some friends that are great with remembering names and faces. So when you go, oh, that one girl, she was in the pink blazer, what was it? They can give it to you. Wedding shows are an amazing opportunity to see if you vibe with potential vendors, but it can be an absolute waste of your time if you go in unprepared, malnourished, with no water in your system, because of course you're not going to remember anything we talk about. Now, granted, you're going to remember how people made you feel, if you felt welcome, if you jived with them, and oftentimes businesses will always give you a card or a little brochure. So make sure that you keep those organized as well. And like I had said, make sure you reach out early, especially after a wedding show. The amount of inquiries that vendors get is increased tenfold by your typical day that we would find on a Monday or on a Tuesday. After a wedding show, our inboxes typically triple. So you want to make sure that you're part of that early reach out group. So that way we can give you the best availability and the best options for what we can do for you. Now, again, Amy and I do our best to keep these brief, to keep these short, but I know that I'm getting close to that 25, 30-minute mark. Granted, I did spend about 7 minutes of it talking to myself before I officially added myself to the stream. But I wanted to leave you with a few industry insights. Now, again, I am the first to admit that I am not a wedding pro. I am very much in this the same way that you are. And I'm noticing myself now as more couples reach out with concerns. I'm putting myself definitely more in your shoes now that I'm navigating similar waters. So a few things that you're going to want to keep in mind, and it's a gross thing, especially if you've been keeping your eye on the housing market. But just like the housing market, I don't see weddings slowing down anytime soon. Not only did we see an increase in couples having to pick up their days from 2020, 2021, some 2022, and move them into further years, we've also seen an increase in relationships. So it's not to say that more people are dating than ever before, but the dating that's happening is becoming way more serious. Typically, that courting season may last like 2 to 3 years before somebody pops the question because, you live separately and then you move in together and then you do a few housing shopping things. But especially with COVID, a lot of couples sped up their transition. So maybe they moved in together after 3 months. And then after 3 months, they realized, holy cow, this is the best. And it's time to get married right away. We're seeing an increase in couples in terms of how quick that dating turnaround is. So keep in mind that not only are you battling with couples from previous years, you're also going to be just having the typical competition of couples that have gotten engaged the same time that you have, which was quite a bit if you were scrolling on Instagram or Facebook on Valentine's Day. I know my feed was just filled with ring boxes. I don't know about yours. But a big thing that you need to understand is that hustle and bustle surrounding the wedding day likely won't go away. I really thought that we were going to see a massive increase in micro ceremonies and elopements. And to be honest with you, if you had asked me 2 years ago if I ever thought that big ballroom wedding scene would ever come back, I probably would have said likely no. But if we're being honest, it has been a 50-50 split. There is a beautiful blend of couples that are choosing to go the more small, intimate, private property way. And then there's couples that are still willing to do the 300, 400 person wedding and plan for big. However you've decided to celebrate is how you've decided to celebrate. But just be prepared that those questions surrounding your day won't go away. The popularity, the excitement, the anticipation of a wedding will never, ever diminish. There's nothing that could take that excitement away from a family. And there's nothing that can take that excitement away from parents wanting to know more and more and more about your wedding day. Now, there's one other thing that I'd like to clarify, and Amy and I have said it before, and I'd like to officially retract this statement. We have said that the only thing that your guest and your family are expecting of you is to get married. And I want to take that back because Jody from Something New Officiants actually said something beautiful, where no one is expecting you to get married. We're just expecting you to be happy. And as a wedding planner, it seems bizarre to say that we don't expect you to have a wedding. But we do expect you to be happy and to be there for one another and ultimately to commit to one another because you already have. So if you decide after all of the stress that you have gone through in these past couple of years that a wedding right now is not the time, or maybe there's been a few more transitional moments, maybe you, again, are celebrating a new family, maybe you have just bought a house, maybe you have a car payment that you weren't expecting and now you really can't even justify any other purchases. Whatever the reason might be that you decide that planning your wedding is not right, that is also okay. You have already committed to spending the rest of your lives together, and this is something that I firmly believe in. If it suits the two of you best to have a 10-year engagement, amazing. You're together for 10 years. If it suits you two better to get married within 3 months and then have an incredible 9-year and 9-month wonderful, wonderful life, you've still been together for 10 years. It's the same amount of time. You're still together. So if you honestly look inward, respect the fact that pressure to get married, to have the white picket fence, that cookie cutter lifestyle, that has shifted huge in 2022. So if you are starting to get that panic mode of, wow, this is really starting to look like my parents' wedding day, no one is stopping you from slamming on those brakes and going, wait. This isn't what we wanted. This isn't what I wanted. I'm not quite there. Do what you need to do that makes you happy. But again, likely if you're taking care of your own wedding planning and if you're spending your Sunday afternoons tuning in with us, it's because you really want to get married. You want to have that wicked wedding that's personal, that's not your parents' wedding, but it does tie in those beautiful family traditions. You want a day that doesn't mimic somebody else's, but you still have to be wary of accepting other people's advice because I hate to break it to you, they might know more than we do. It's a hard thing for a 90s baby to ever admit. And mom, if you're watching this, I will deny it. But sometimes our generation can be wrong. And sometimes the things that we're really stressed out about and the things that we're overthinking aren't, I'm not going to say aren't valid because they are, but they aren't necessary. You have got likely a team that is willing to support you, an entire group of friends and family that are willing to support you, to give you advice, to offer you any lending hands that you need. So please don't be afraid to take them, but understand that it is your day. It's okay to say, I don't want this the same day as you, mom. I really appreciate that you want me to wear your veil. And, bonus mom, I really appreciate that you want me to wear your headpiece, but it's too much stress to pick. So I'm going to pick my own. Or can the three of us all go shopping and we can all pick one together? Whatever is going to serve you best is ultimately going to serve your family best. You might not always know what's right in terms of wedding plans, but you do know what's right in terms of yourself. So don't be afraid to take that advice if you are starting to feel stressed out. Talk about it. The more you release, the more it's going to release off of your chest. And again, Amy and I are always here every single Sunday if you ever do need an outside perspective, because again, that fishbowl effect can really kick in when it comes to wedding planning and everybody just wants to help you and lend love and light, but it can get a lot. So I like to think that on Sundays, we give you those little bite-sized tidbits and give you as much advice as we can throw at you in a short amount of time. As always, if you need any advice, we are always here through email, through our newsletters, live at 1:00 on Sundays, as well as at our studio space. We are hoping to jump back into hosting our workshops in full fruition. So keep an eye on those because that is a great opportunity for you to keep working on your wedding, but in a completely new environment. So I hope I haven't rambled too much. I hope some of this is useful to you. Understand that, yes, as the generation of, I don't want to say complete personalization because I like to think that we still love tradition, but as a generation that really loves keeping things true to themselves, keep your wedding plans true to you. Keep your wedding plans true to you. Keep the advice true to your family. Keep whatever you need, but ultimately know that things have changed and that really, as long as you're keeping a smile on your face and you're finding a way to keep happy in your wedding plans, you're doing all that you need to be doing. Keep celebrating yourselves, keep celebrating the two of you, and we will see you back next Sunday while we are at the wedding ring show. We'll see everybody then. Have a great rest of your Sunday.